Just try to get everything positioned here. Okay. You guys can see it. And
Yes.
so let's see, where do we stop here? Okay, so we're going to shift gears from the Abhidharma Samuccaya and to, well, go from some mind-only perspective on Abhidharma to accurate perception here. What I thought, there's a very interesting crossover though, because coming towards the end of what I hope, the material that I hope we'll be able to get to towards the end, we actually see K Drip J start to interpret some of the second school's positions from a mind-only perspective. So I think that's kind of an interesting segue in between the two texts. So we stopped here at 467 last time. We'll go ahead and read it to see if we do need to go back a couple of sections for a little context. But we'll see. So Zechik Yina, Den Zen Mik Shaki, De Rekja Yang Tongwa Tel, De La Drup Juk, Yimpa Kang Shik, Te Dang De Rekja Zechik Yimbeachir, Kor Sum K. So Zechik Yina typically means to be one thing is to be another thing substantially. So what were we talking about?
Yeah, right.
uh, yeah.
Parts in the whole.
What's that? Yeah, parts in a whole. Yeah, exactly. But even further, in relation to what two aspects of a given object that we were talking about. So we're talking about the cup. We're talking about the cup itself, but we're also talking about its touchability, right? So the cup as a whole, right, has many different aspects, many different qualities,
Mhm.
and one of those qualities would be its touchability, right? Your ability to pick it up and take a sip from it. So typically this calm here means or. So you're given two choices. Um, Either a cup's touchability and the cup are such that to be one is to be the other substantially, or they're two separate things, right? So,
Adam, when you say to be one is to be the other,
mhm,
it
I'll formulate
versus
it.
saying to be one is to be the other substantially, would you say those, at least at this moment in the text, are the same
Well,
or
I think
different?
what's going on here is a very interesting distinction between physical reality and conceptual reality. So
Hmm.
to be this to be the other could be applied to something non-substantial, right?
Hmm.
Which
Hmm.
could be
Hmm.
conceptual. So are Cheetsens, are Rikchis and Dunchis similar?
They are both ideas. Richie is an idea
Yeah.
around a certain type of thing, and a Dunchi is an idea around something specific that we've seen,
Yeah.
maybe.
So mainly what I'm trying to get into is that there's a very kind of strict line that's drawn between working things and or changing things and unchanging things. And so I think the substantial here, when we see substantial, um, we're specifically relegating our talk to changing things. But if we were going to say, I think your question was why the why do we use the word substantial, and what's the importance of making sure that you put ze in there? And it's just my own opinion, but I think if you weren't to
Mhm.
put it in there, it could leave open the discussion to things which are unchanging as well.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
to be unchanging is to also be a negative phenomenon,
And is
right?
that touchability that the cup possesses? Is this Yupe Tope Rekja?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Which is like what existing as a thing, which
As an
is
as
touchable.
an yeah, that has some sort of structiveness to it,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we gave him the option. We said, okay, well, things are either substantially the same, substantially one thing. Geshe Michael specifically said he doesn't like the translation of Zaychik to be substantially one thing. So if we
Hmm.
say, yeah, so anyways, but for the simplicity and the sake of our translators,
Yeah.
I may from now on just say substantially the same. Okay. Um, so we gave
Okay.
him the option.
Okay.
We said that if a cup exists, then the cup itself and the touchability have to be substantially the same thing, right? Or they could be
Hmm.
separate. But you can't say that they're separate. Why not? Can a part like okay, so can in order for anything to be real, right? In order for anything in reality to exist, it has to either be one with its parts or separate from its parts.
Yeah.
And
Or yeah.
this same argument would apply to anything in reality. And if it's not one with its parts, or if it's not separate from its parts, then it doesn't exist and it's not real. So he just contradicted himself based on an earlier position that he took here in 466. So at some point he said it's impossible for the whole of the parts to be substantially separate from the parts. That makes a bunch of sense. Why? Because is Adam his arm? No. Is Adam separate from his arm? I don't think you can say that either.
Right. We're
Right?
saying Yenlock or part or aspect or something, which to me, like Adam's quality of being a person is a
Mm-hmm.
little different than a part. And I think that's what I'm
100%.
trying to wrap my mind around. If I would say
Yeah.
Adam's arm,
Yeah.
that's different than Adam's arm. But is Adam a
So,
person?
so
Is a
what,
different kind of question.
well, one of the things that, so in the first part of this book, if we go back, I think it's almost 3 years now that we've been doing this book. Towards the beginning of the book, Geshe Michael outlined that there's in the ancient Indian tradition of logic, let's say, and accurate perception, that there is an Indian school that we're constantly kind of going back and forth with. That there were a
Mhm.
lot of ideas that were held in ancient India that these arguments that we're being presented with by J are a direct response to. One of those
Yes.
things was in response to a school called the Nyaya, and the Nyaya
Hmm.
assert that there was a whole that exists separate from its parts. That's kind of like in a different way than like the Sankhya's, right? Like the Sankhya's have this idea that prakriti or nature is this thing that kind of exists separate from any existing object, but along with. So, what we're combating here specifically is the idea that there can be a self which is separate from the parts,
Okay.
right?
Okay. Yeah. So if I
Like,
can ask, I hope it's not too tedious, but I'm hoping that it'll be helpful for other people if I'm stuck,
yeah, yeah.
that hopefully someone else is stuck. Um,
I appreciate the back and forth. Yeah, I love it.
As long as
if
you guys just slow the tempo just a little bit.
Cool. Thank you. I need a metronome.
to be Ben's arm is not to be Ben. The thing that's Ben's arm is not Ben because you need a whole Ben. But
Yeah.
Ben is a person.
Mhm.
So if we say person is a bigger group, and person is a quality in the sense that to be a person is it's something that's true about Ben. So we can
Yeah.
say that I have the quality of being a person, and we could say that I am Chik with person in the sense that being Ben is being a person. Now, to be a person doesn't go both ways because you could be Adam. There's another person,
Yeah.
uh, and so I'm wondering if we're still in this zone here. Being person is different than being Ben because person is a bigger group, but Ben is a person, and so I'm Zay Chick. You could say substantially, right? Geshe Michael also says to be one, to be Ben is to be the other, is to be a person. Are we in that realm at the moment?
Yes, very, you know, I would say that's parallel to where we're going. If you wanted to just go ahead and jump in, because I've been spending a lot of time preparing for the class, so I've kind of looked ahead and I've been trying to wrap my head around where we've come from and where we're going.
Good.
The
Thank you.
crux of where we're at in this text, and let's step away from personhood. Let's step away from what it means to be Adam, and let's just look at a coffee cup. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So coffee cups, right, have parts. They have colors. They
Yes.
have typability. Yeah. They have,
Yes.
a handle, a left part, a right part. Um, and what's going to happen is the more that we reduce this thing, okay, because in this school, the only thing that's real is partless atoms and partless moments of consciousness, individual moments of consciousness. So when we
Yes.
look at the coffee cup, right, we have to consider the fact that it's made of atoms, right? So we're going to reduce it down to its most basic components. And if we were to look at a coffee cup and say, okay, well, when you have a direct perception of a coffee cup, you're not perceiving atoms. You're perceiving a collection of atoms, right? So, from the standpoint of this school, we'd have to say that there's some sort of a mental overlay. There's some sort of a labeling process that's taking part. So,
So at this
yeah.
point in the text, Adam, if I say that the coffee cup is a touchable thing,
Mhm.
that a quality of the coffee cup is its touchability. You can touch it. I just happen to have a, a delightfully touchable coffee cup here. And
Yeah.
it is to be a coffee cup is to be a touchable thing.
Yeah.
But just because you're a touchable thing doesn't mean you're a coffee cup. And I want to say that that's a little different than the way I think of a part. The part is the handle or the
Well,
work the paint, but the
so
quality is touchability.
well, one of the things that we explored in the collecting topics were how relation, right? And so how parts relate to wholes. And it might be something to sit with. It's just something that I'll touch on, but for our audience, it's something that won't make sense at face value, and it's something that you have to take to the meditation cushion. Parts and wholes, in a relational way, from the perspective that 466 is looking at this particular issue, would say that the handle would have to be present. Uh, the the whole would have to be existent in every one of the parts. So the handle would have to, if you separated the two, it would not. The status of the thing as a whole would not change.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? Like the relationship of the unit that, okay, so when you think about a coffee cup as a whole, you've got this whole thing, but your eye isn't necessarily perceiving that thing as a whole. Okay. Your eye, when it sees different aspects of that thing. Okay. Now, what we learned in the collected topics, and the reason that I brought that up, is to mention that the handle, if you were to take the handle away, the cup would still be the unitary thing that you started with. Okay. And we know that that's not true. So basically, what the argument that I'm presenting is one that is that's held by an ancient Indian school called the Nyaya school, and what's called Nyaya holes. And what they believe is that if you take the handle away, the thing still exists as a unitary whole, as the thing that you started with. So parts and wholes is
Okay.
to be, yeah.
I wish he had chosen handle instead of touchability. It's
Oh, I
it's a
see.
he didn't consult with me, and that's okay. He
Yeah.
shouldn't need to, but um, touchability seems like a difficult choice because
Well,
um,
here's where we're going. What we're about to be, and I think this is a very good way to lead into 467. I don't want to cut you off, but I
it's
think
great.
the touchability aspect of the coffee cup, what we're about to look at is, um, okay, right? That thing which is held by the consciousness of the eye. Okay, so when you hold the coffee cup with the perception of your eye, okay, when you take this object coffee cup that Ben's holding up there, does your eye also perceive its touchability?
Maybe
Well,
does it?
what we've learned for the past 4 months is that yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay, because you're
Yeah.
perceiving a touchable thing,
Yeah.
so you're seeing the quality.
But I
Because
warned
every time you,
everybody.
Mhm.
Sorry, I warned everybody because this is about to break down in about 5 sections. This is about to break down, and there's going to be a spoke, a stick that's going to be stuck into the spoke of our bike, and
Oh, good.
yeah. So what we've been learning for the past 4 months, we've been on a very long debate about whether or not things as a whole, um, whether or not your perception of a coffee cup means that you're perceiving every aspect of it simultaneously, right? So um, I think it's a very interesting choice that he chose Rekja, right? Because now
Yeah.
he's getting into the fact that, like, well, does the does your eye consciousness perceive the smell of pizza whenever there's a new pizza placed on the table in front of you? Does your eye consciousness perceive the smell?
No,
Uh-uh.
but it does perceive a smellable thing.
A smellable thing. And yeah. So, anyways, so let's see where we can go from here. I hope
Yeah.
I didn't go down too many. I didn't open up too many doors and confuse anybody further.
There
So
was a nice note in the chat, Adam.
yeah,
Uh,
let's see.
Tim just pointed out that it's not just about speaking slower, but
Hmm.
also offering a lot of pauses. And the only reason I point that out is because there were a conspicuous number of hearts and prayer hands attached to it. So that must mean that the translators feel that this is a very useful piece of advice for people like you and I.
Yeah, my chat's not coming up. So with that in mind, I'll try to speak at a slower pace, and I'll also
Pauses.
try to take more pauses. There's only one way to get better at speaking via translators, and that's just to do it. So I welcome the practice.
Me too.
Uh, Dainzin, Mikshe Dei Rekja Yang, Hongwar Tao. So if you say that they are such that to be one is to be substantially the other, then you must be saying that the I consciousness which holds it also sees its touchability.
Good.
So we're
Yeah, Pei Ling wisely said this in the chat earlier, that you can't see the touchability because you're not touching it with your fleshy hands.
right. Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's a very interesting talk because
Mhm.
what did we hear about uh, the quality of being changing and sound? Our ear, the consciousness of our ear actually does perceive the changing nature of sound. So there are qualities that we perceive, right?
Mhm.
Is that necessarily um, sequestered? Is that reducible to the sense spheres, the keiches? Can they only perceive um, qualities that are in accord with their particular object?
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
so
And I
You're
wanna
not
tip the
mine.
hat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, right. Yeah, good.
yeah. Well, yeah. So no, it's a very good point. So Droop Juke here, this from the way that I first encountered it was to think of it like you're engaging the object totally. Um, However,
Mm.
it's the way that Geshe Michael is. Am I doing a little better, translators? I'm trying. I feel like I'm almost being too conscious to be slow now.
Adam, it's a
Don't think
huge
you
improvement, dude. I noticed that the pauses are priceless.
I don't
Okay.
think you can be too careful in a topic like this.
Okay. So what we're about to juxtapose, what we're differentiating between here is droop juke as a positive engagement by the sense
Hmm.
conscious and
Hmm.
a conceptual or negative perception of those sense perceptions, right? So you can think of these as oppositional terms. You have the process of elimination that the mental images use to conceptually understand um, the sense data, but you also have this positive aspect here. So when you see droop droop, what you should be considering is that you're specifically talking about sense data. Okay.
Okay.
So you're specifically talking about what's coming in um, through the eye, the ear, the nose, right?
Okay. So it seems anytime we say we're engaging in a thing in a positive way, we can assume we're talking on the realm of the five senses.
100%, 100%.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I think the more that you work through texts like these, I've been spending a lot of text. I spend all day kind of inside this material. So what I've started to see jump out is that there are terms like droop droop that uh, make me realize that, oh, Master Dharmakirti is talking about this in a certain way. Um, so this Kong shik here is usually a split reason. It's always a split reason, not usually. So what we're going to look at now is the reason that he gives for saying so a consequence, excuse me, of what he said our opponent is asserting. So first, it's something which is engaged by a positive phenomenon or a positive perception, and secondly, its touchability is such that to be it is to substantially be the other. Um, so this Corsum K means that kind of going all the way back here where he was given the choice between it either being Zechik or being Tade, right? He blew both of those. He contradicted himself because we kind of showed that, well, it can't be substantially one, but it also can't be the other. Excuse me, it can't also be separate. So let's see. Should we go through the Tibetan?
You and I had a talk, Adam,
Mhm.
also that everyone wasn't there for, about the difference, and it might have been a text, um, about the difference between like mitakpa versus mitakpa yimba.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm wondering if that's relevant here. I'm going to put those terms in the chat just to be helpful. That, for example, a coffee cup is mitakpa.
Mm-hmm.
It is a thing that's changing, but mitakpa yimba means is changing, and is
Yeah.
changing is a concept, whereas mitakpa changing thing is something that you could engage in or look at directly with your eyeballs. And you can't look directly with your eyeballs at the fact or the yimba, the truth of a thing being changing. And so that made me feel sensitive about the way that he said
Yeah.
rekja, touchability. Is he saying it is touchable, or is he saying touchable thing? And can you tell by the
Yeah.
phrasing which one of those he's saying?
I can't tell from the phrasing, but just from the 3 years of familiarity that I've gotten from dealing with this stuff, I kind of see that he appears to be talking about touchability in a categorical way, and not necessarily as an if I see cell phone in front of me,
Yeah,
I also
yeah.
see the category of changing thing. The two cannot exist apart from one another. So this cell phone, this particular cell phone, when I look at it, uh, I'm also seeing the category of it being a changing thing. And in that same way, when you look at a cell phone or a coffee cup, you are seeing it belonging to the category of things which are touchable. Now, this is something that for years, ever since I first studied Course 13, nearly 12 years ago, um, the I had this assumption that yes, there are two clear versions of reality, and one of those being conceptual, and one of those being changing. Right. So one of them being changing and one of them being unchanging. And I had it in mind that anything that was categorical was necessarily um, unchanging.
Mm, mm.
Right.
But it doesn't seem that way to you
Does
now.
not seem that way now. No, after
Right.
13 years of sitting with this, and going through periods where I thought harder about it than other times,
Then,
I have and basically that's 100%. It's 100% due to Geshe Michael's. He's been so patient in explaining this stuff, and it takes it takes a while, and it feels like just the past few months, there's been a lot of things clicking, and it's 100% due to the kindness of my teacher. There's a lot of misconceptions that I've had, that I still don't feel like I've cleared up, but I feel like I'm getting a stronger hold on. And it's very, very important stuff. I feel like, I feel like getting a hold on whether or not you see the aspect of changingness in an object, to me, I feel like is one of the most important things that I could be meditating on from day to day. And one of the things that I feel like I've gotten a little closer to, and I hate to throw in a new term, but soak cheese. Soak cheese are they're very interesting when you begin to think about. I've heard in some of my research, I've heard and I've seen scriptural kind of reference to soak cheese not being real cheese. That soak cheese exists as a way of tying things together, which I think is kind of where we're going. So it's a very interesting thing to me because for a long time I had now, Ben, you said something earlier though that I have to push back on a little bit when you said the fact that. So if you use the fact to describe any characteristic of any object, it necessarily is a conceptual thing and it necessarily is unchanging. I'm not talking about the fact that things are changing. What I'm trying to really drill down on is that when you perceive any object, you are perceiving its momentary nature. You are witnessing the product of an object breaking down from moment to moment in this constant state of flux. And we're not perceiving it on an atomic level, but we are necessarily in some way tying these objects and all of these parts together into a single thing.
Yeah.
So
if I have this fine product from the Little Bear Coffee Company in
Yeah.
Albuquerque, New Mexico, please come visit anytime. I'll buy you a coffee. That goes for anybody here. I'm looking at a specific thing, but this Little Bear coffee cup is a coffee cup. So in the sense that I'm looking at a coffee cup, there's a category that I'm seeing with my eye, perhaps. I'm seeing coffee cup. In fact, I'm also seeing the bigger category cup.
Exactly.
I am looking at a cup. No one could say I'm not looking at a cup. No one could say that I'm not looking at a touchable thing.
Yeah.
But
another one of those categories would be that it is changing. So when you pick up an object, it feels very static. It feels right.
Yeah.
There's a touchability to it. There's an aspect of physicalness. But you are handling and you are touching that thing's changingness. Which is to me, that was kind of eye-opening. One, because when you think about, to go back to the concept of Ben, the mind-body complex of Ben, or the mind-body complex of Adam, I'm something which is neither physical nor mental, but I'm still changing. Okay? So the category of Denman Duches is a very interesting thing when you apply it to any physical object, because not only are physical objects the result of atomic collections, right, of particles, of indivisible particles, but they're also the collection of moments, and they're a stream of moments. So from that same standpoint, not only are they physical, but you have to consider the object as a stream of instances. And the only way that I can really make sense of that is that there has to be a placeholder category for things to exist, right? Like from moment to moment to moment to moment to moment to moment to moment.
Like you need, when you say a placeholder, you mean you need one word that sticks around for a little while the coffee cup does its
Thing.
changing.
This is the thing. Yeah, that's changiness. And that's why changiness is Dinman Duce.
Oh, is a changing thing which is neither mental nor physical, because it could be either, because sometimes you got physical changing things, sometimes you got mental changing things, so the category isn't either.
Well, physical things and reality itself, if you want, you have to reduce everything down. This is why earlier I began by saying, like, well, when we look at a coffee cup, you have to be ready to go a level deeper and to reduce it a level deeper. And so when you look at the definition of reality that's given by Master Dharmakirti, he says that reality is the interplay, okay, of objects, of atomic matter, okay, and partless moments of awareness. Okay, so reality is a bunch of atoms making up everything that we see that are directly causing us to perceive it. Okay, so the cause of our perception are the objects that are out there.
In this school.
In this school. And the objects themselves have to have some continuum to them. They have to be some. So, you know, without going too deep into it, or without getting really lost in the weeds, you know, yeah, I started to really want to know as much as I could about Dinman Duces. Like, you know, it really made me start to think a little closer to it. And that was all because we were talking about how Dradang Mitapa, how sound and its changiness are actually substantially one thing. And for years, I always considered them separate. Say, oh, if you're going to, but that's also why Geshe Michael made a very clear point to distinguish between Ngunsum, perceiving something directly, and Ngepa, ascertaining it. So there's an object that's held, right? And you're holding sound, you're holding a coffee cup, you're perceiving a coffee cup, you're perceiving its changiness. However, you are not ascertaining the changiness, because in order to ascertain any quality is necessarily a conceptual process. And it's something that can only be done through abstraction and reasoning. So I think it's interesting that he brought up touchability here, because now you're presented with the very clear kind of weird feeling that your eye, as a consequence, right, should also be perceiving the touchability of an object, which is a little weird to think. Like, you know, if the ear is perceiving changiness, then why can't the eye perceive touchability? They seem equally plausible, right? Okay, so should we go on? Let's see where we go.
Let's try.
Okay.
Thank you for your patience, Adam.
Dude, I could literally hours. I would love to just sit here and talk about this stuff for hours, man. Yang Nam Rikpe Wang Du Chene Wang Du Chena Ngunzen Mikshake Din Nam Church and Kirki Ngupo Ngususumartel Ngunzen Mikshe Langusu Juk Kan Shik Ngunzen Mikshe Dang Ngupo Zechik Yimbe here. So Yang with this furthermore here, kind of continuing on from the same. He just wants to drill down a
Mhm.
little further to say, oh, okay,
Mhm.
if that's the case, then what about this too? So Nam Rik Pe Wang Du Chena. So from the perspective of a self-perception, okay.
Oh.
Yeah, this is where it starts to get a little crazy in here. It starts to get a little wild when you bring up. Okay, so Ngun Zin Mikshake Zin Nam Churchin. So hold on. If we consider the aspect held by the eye consciousness, right? And this Zinnam here, this is, like I said, after spending years with Master Dharmakirti, there are kind of words and phrases that pop out. And Zinnam is one of those that we're really gonna focus on right now.
Mm.
Zinnam and Zung.
Oh,
Okay.
no. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are two different aspects of how we perceive things. So Zinnam is what I chose to translate as subjective awareness. Okay. And
Mm.
Sungna, or how you perceive something directly, right? He says right here, Ngusu Sung. Ngusu Sung. So the way that I think of Sung when we're talking about perceptual theory is on an objective basis. So once again, you have a very clear um, oppositional terms here. Okay.
Yeah.
So this Sung and Zen are subjective and subjective and objective perceptions respectively. Okay. Zen Nam being your subjective awareness, and Sung, or the Musu Sung, he'll use Sung Nam down here. We'll see it come up. And what we're talking about now, and the reason he's bringing those up is because he brought up what?
I had a question about this. Isn't he saying from the perspective of the mind only school?
That's what I
Yeah.
wanted to believe
The
also.
non-Rikpas are the Chittamatras, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
the Simpsons. Yeah. What was
Yeah.
it?
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
Right. The
yeah,
Namarikpas, what is it?
The
Vijnana
mentalist
Vadin.
session. Yeah.
Yeah, well, remember how I told you guys what we're going into and why I thought Stanley's book was a very good segue
Mm.
into our particular section today. Because we get into a Yogacara interpretation of Master Dharmakirti,
Yeah.
these particular sections. So that's kind of why I led off with saying that it's kind of seems serendipitous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. And I do agree that Nam Rikpa here is from the perspective of the Simsampas, because I don't know
Yeah.
where, but yeah, here it is. Look, you see,
Yeah.
but right. So he's looking. Okay, the sutra in the mind only school. Do you see?
I'll tell you, there's a
I just
section in my book when they talk about the mind only school, which gets into a big debate about different groups of mind only school,
Mhm.
depending on the relationship between what's in the mind and what's being held. And they
Yeah,
use this word nampa, the
yeah,
thing you're
yeah, yeah, yeah,
looking
yeah, yeah.
at or how
Totally,
it's
totally,
represented. Are you seeing the whole thing out there and the whole
totally.
thing in here? Are you seeing a
Yeah,
bunch of little bits out there and a bunch of little bits in
yeah.
here?
Well, we have to say first off that yes, Nampa is, and I was hoping Word, if Word was here, I was like, actually, I have to slow down. As I was preparing for the class, um, as I was preparing for the class, I was hoping that Word may have some things to add as well, because from what I've seen, Nampa is a very um, it's a widely used term within the
Yeah.
because and what we're getting into here, because we were saying the Zen Nam and the Sung Nam, or the Shinrik, right, and the Namrik. Okay, are you guys right?
Yeah.
Shinrik, Namrik. Here, let's get through this paragraph, and we'll get to it in the
Generic,
next.
nomeric. Okay.
Yeah,
What's appearing to you and what's appearing in the mind?
yeah, totally. Yeah. A subjective
Okay.
appearance and
Ah.
an objective appearance. So
So I look at this, happen to have this thing here still in my hand, and there's the thing,
mhm.
and then there's the picture of it in my mind, right?
Yeah.
Or the picture of it in my eye. In fact, sometimes you see, like in high school science class or something, they say like there's a upside down picture of it in the back of your eye or
Right.
something, and that
Yeah.
picture of it floating in your head that represents the thing out there is a subjective nampa. It's a subjective picture, is the
Yeah.
one in my head.
Yeah. Now, the interesting
Okay.
thing, so from where the Eastern perspective, I think, differs from the Western perspective is what we're really trying to zone in on is where do those two things meet? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How does the conceptual awareness make contact with a physical object?
Mm.
You see what I'm saying? Like, that's a very
I
profound
see
question.
that it's a problem.
How does sense data turn into a concept?
Oh, please tell us.
How does that happen? I mean, this is a very central question, and Nampa, they say, is the intermediary between the two.
Mm.
Nampa, Nampa, Nampa is the medium through which physical reality interacts with the conceptual awareness.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's why, from what I can tell, my very limited understanding of these texts, that's why Nampa is brought in here, because we've been talking about what touchability of coffee cups. Yeah, how do you see this? Right? Is touchability something that is abstract, or is touchability something that exists in the physical world? Right. And so
Mm-hmm.
what we're going to do is we're going to try to find out in the next 10 minutes. We're going to try to go there.
Okay.
Yeah, so I agree. I do agree. But I don't know. I didn't go back and reach this. Not this Nam Rikpa, I think probably should be in some way referencing the mind only school. Instead of this self-perception here. So, but I think everything else should still stand. So because it is directly and positively engaged by the eye consciousness, like we said, any sense perception is necessarily a positive phenomenon. And any sense perception is engaged with its object in a positive way. And when I say positive, for non-English speakers, it may be better to say, or it may be better to give some context in saying that positive is opposed to negative or the conceptual realm. Okay, does that make sense? So you have two ways of engaging with objects. You have two ways of engaging. You have many different. Okay, you have direct perception, you have inferential perception. Yeah. You've got also what we learned earlier in this text was you have implicit perception and you have explicit perception. You have wrong sins and you have cheat sins, don't you? You have conventional reality and you have ultimate reality. So you have positive phenomenon and you have negative phenomenon. And I'm drilling in on that because there's a bifurcation. There's a there's a division of reality that K-Drip-J and Master Dharmakirti are continually going back to saying, you got physical stuff and you got mental stuff, right? You got wrong sense, you got chi sense. You got ultimate reality, which he says is physical, and you have conventional reality, which he says are fictitious things like concepts. Okay. So once again, yeah, there's another division of reality into two here, and that is subjective and objective. Okay.
And this one less relating to the logic school and more relating to the
To the
mind.
mind only. Yeah. But I mean, because we've always heard, right, that there was a certain subset of the Sautrantika school that tend, and the Sautrantikas following reasoning, right, tend to be Yogacara or mind only. That there's a certain subset of the second school which interprets Master Dharmakirti from a mind only perspective. And I'm interested to see how the next, like, 1,500 pages of this book go. Because if we're here at 468, I don't really know where else we're going to go.
So where we're at then is he's saying, and this is the other guy, I guess, because we're not allowed to agree to this, but consider the blue, or the picture of blue, being held by the eye. It is the blue that you're seeing directly, that's out there essentially, because it's the blue that's being held by the eye, and it's also the blue that's being understood by your visual awareness.
100%. Let's go to 469. That's where we're at. That's where we're at. Do you guys mind if I read, just so we can kind of
yeah, good.
Dana Ngunzim Mikshe Dang Dei Zin Nam Nila Rang Rik Shin Rik Kepar Mepartel. Was it no Kepar Mepartelwe Kyun Junshin Zinam Langopo Nampa Masharna Ngopo Ngusu Topar Mitela Nampa Sharna Ngunzin Mikshe La Sharwe Ngompo Nampadhang Dei Zinam La Sharwe Ngompoe Nampani Nampani Chik Yin Nam Tade Yina.
Now, was that too fast for the translators? It was just a joke. Just a joke. I'm sorry. So I'm being silly.
No, like,
it's no problem for them.
So if he accepts, right? If he accepts that the objective awareness of blue and the subjective awareness of blue are substantially the same, then how are we? Okay. The problem arises that for an objective awareness, there would be no difference between an eye consciousness which holds the color blue and the two aspects held by self-perception. So we're going another level deeper here, because there's an idea that that self-perception or apperception, what's wrong Rick here, always has a perception of his self.
Oh,
okay.
Right.
Yeah. So so Ngun Zin Mikshe Dang Dei Zin Nam Ni. Let's see. Yeah, so the no difference. So the Kepar Mepar Tel. I went, let's see. Okay. So these two aspects, right? Between an eye consciousness which holds the color blue and the two aspects held by Rangrek. Okay. So
the blue being held by the visual awareness and Daijin Nam.
Well,
What's the day here?
remember that Zen Nam is
Please.
always subjective. So the day is the subjective awareness of the color blue. So the
Mhm,
color
mhm,
blue
mhm.
outside and the color blue inside, right?
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
and
Okay.
what we're saying is that Rong Rick has to have a perception of both of those things.
So the state of mind that sees
Y-
you seeing.
Yeah, well, the subjective awareness has to be aware of the object that's outside. If it wasn't, then how could you ever have any kind of perception of anything? Um, you know what I mean? And the self perception also has to be aware of the subjective, uh, uh, the subjective
Uh,
appearance of blue.
uh,
So
okay.
you have this
So
thing called
yeah.
self perception. You
Uh-huh.
have this internal perception of blue, and you also have this perception of blue outside. You have a perception of a coffee cup outside of you, and you also have a perception of a coffee cup that's inside, right? And there's a part of
Yeah.
your awareness that is aware of both of those things.
Yeah. So if
That
you
is,
say the picture, basically, if you say the picture in your mind is the same as the thing out there, then these two great divisions of awareness, which
yeah,
is awareness of objects and awareness of your own awareness,
yeah, yeah,
would
yeah,
have
yeah,
to
yeah.
be the same, because your awareness of your own
Yeah.
awareness should be an awareness of the outside object if they're the
Yeah.
same. If the outside object and the inside object are exactly the same, then when you look inside to see what it's like to see what is Ben seeing,
Yeah.
what you see is the cup
Yeah.
and not Ben's mind
Well, then
version of the
why would
cup.
you need, why would you need Shinrik then?
Why would you
Shinrik,
need to see outer things if all you got to do is look at your own mind to see the real cup?
if your subjective awareness is having a perception of the external object and the internal object, then why do you need a separate awareness that is only capable of seeing outer objects? Because it would seem that Shinrik is doing both of those things. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm.
It seems that Shinrik, or excuse me, it seems that Rangrik is
Mm-hmm,
doing
mm-hmm.
is doing two jobs. And so why would you even need a Shinrig? Because Rangrik is doing the
Yeah.
it's already performing the same function.
So
Um,
everybody knows you've got awareness of objects and awareness of awareness in this school. And
yeah.
so if the awareness of an
Okay.
object is the same as the object, if the
Yeah.
awareness of coffee cup is the same as the coffee cup,
Mhm.
then how in the heck can there be a difference between awareness of objects and
Dude.
awareness of awareness?
Okay, so just to tie it up, I think we're like we got to tie it's time, right?
Boy, oh
Yeah,
boy,
we just
yeah.
hit time.
So not a bad cliffhanger, maybe.
just to tie it up though, I need the chat or whoever is participating. What are the two types of perception?
Munsum and J-Pot, is that
Yeah.
the one's direct
Is there?
perception and
Yeah.
idea perception or deductive perception,
Yeah.
conceptual perception?
So is there a third type?
Within J-pop
No,
divisions.
No,
but
there is.
but
There is. There's
oh no.
Nounjorginism.
Oh, sure.
Uh Okay.
this
Yeah.
they actually consider that to be a separate type of perception. Okay. So when you begin to expand and you go up through the ladder of the schools, okay, there's about to be a fourth one presented. And the fourth type of perception is self-perception, is wrong.
Wrong, Rick.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Perception
So,
of your perception.
so they say there are actually, in total, there are 4 types of perception.
Oh
Okay.
no.
From the perspective of the second school, there's only 2,
Ooh, yeah.
right?
Oh, the mind only school you're saying has 4.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I believe that's also going to hold true up through Prasangika,
No,
right?
Svatantrika.
Wow.
And then Prasangika has a problem with it.
With Rangrik.
Yeah, being a separate type of
Yeah,
perception.
we don't
You
like
would
it.
know it. You would
Oh,
know,
I
dude.
thought everyone had a problem with Ron Rick except for those mentalists
The mentalist.
I think
and
it
those
comes
other
from,
ones who lean toward them.
Right, Chris Angel.
it's
I
going to
have
have
a
to be a cliffhanger.
problem
'Cause
with knowing
Yeah.
if I have a problem. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank
So thank
you.
you guys. No, thank you.
amazing,
Yes,
Adam.
I'm really eager to see just how much differently and how much more skillful Geshe Michael can do by leading us through this when we come back and meet next time, because I'm sure it's going to be a lot more insightful. But thank you for your attention. And thank you for giving me somebody to
Thank you.
really just kind of pontificate and think about these things with.
It's really inspiring to see how deeply you're considering all of these concepts.
Yeah. Love you guys. It's always fun. This is really nice,
Love
man.
you, Adam. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you, everyone. Here's some balloons. See
Have a
you
good
all.
night, folks. Thank you so much.
See you on Saturday for more Xuanzang's Tower. Word, are you taking over? You taking the plane?
Yes, thank you.
All righty.
Thank you,
Stay
Word.
tuned for Words class. Thank you, Word. Ciao,
Yeah,
everybody.
Peace.
Thanks, Adam. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you, Word.
Okay, another amazing mix.